The wind howled like a wild animal outside Jake Hartwell's cabin, rattling the windows and making the walls creak. For 3 days straight, the worst blizzard Montana territory had seen in years had been dumping snow across the valley. Jake sat by his fireplace, mending a broken bridle and listening to the storm rage. He'd seen plenty of bad weather in his 32 years, but this one had teeth. That's when he heard it, a desperate pounding on his front door that was barely louder than the wind. At first, he thought it was just a loose shutter banging against the cabin. But then came the voice. "Please." A woman's scream cut through the blizzard. "He's gone. He took everything and left me here to die." Jake dropped his leather work and rushed to the door. When he pulled it open, the wind nearly knocked him backward. Standing on his porch was a young woman in a soaked white dress that might have been beautiful once. Now it clung to her shivering frame like wet sheets. Her dark hair had come loose from whatever style it had been in, and her face was pale as the snow swirling around her. "Ma'am," Jake had to shout over the wind. "What are you doing out in this storm?" The woman swayed on her feet, clutching a crumpled piece of paper in one hand and a small trunk in the other. I need help. James left me. He left me." Her voice broke, and Jake could see she was about to collapse. He didn't hesitate. Come in right now." Jake grabbed her trunk and guided her inside, slamming the door against the wind. The sudden quiet of the cabin made his ears ring. The woman stood dripping on his wooden floor, her whole body shaking. Up close, Jake could see she was probably in her mid-20s, with fine features that spoke of good breeding. Her dress, despite being ruined by the storm, was made of expensive fabric with delicate lace trim. This wasn't some frontier woman caught in bad weather. This was a lady from back east. "Sit by the fire," Jake said gently, pulling out a chair. "Let me get you something warm to drink." She sank into the chair like her legs wouldn't hold her anymore. Jake busied himself making coffee, stealing glances at his unexpected guest. She was still clutching that piece of paper, and he could see her reading it over and over with growing despair in her eyes. "I'm Jake Hartwell," he said, handing her a steaming mug. "This is my ranch, the Double H. You're safe here." "Catherine Mills," she whispered, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. I was supposed to be Catherine Thornton by now." Her voice caught on the name. Jake had heard that name before. James Thornton owned the spread about 5 miles north, a man Jake had never much liked. Thornton was the type who looked down on working cowboys, even though he'd inherited his land rather than earning it. "Thornton left you out in this storm?" Jake couldn't keep the anger out of his voice. Catherine's laugh was bitter. "He didn't just leave me. He changed his mind completely." She held out the crumpled paper with a trembling hand. "Read it. Go ahead." Jake took the letter, smoothing it out by the firelight. The words were written in a careless scrawl. "I changed my mind about getting married. Find your own way back east. Don't follow me. There's nothing for you here." That's it. Jake stared at the paper in disbelief. That's all he wrote. 3 months of letters, Catherine said, staring into the fire. 3 months of promises about our life together, about the beautiful house he was building, about how he couldn't wait to meet me. I traveled all the way from Boston on those promises. When I got here yesterday, he took one look at me, handed me this note, loaded his wagon, and rode out. Jake had seen plenty of cruelty in his time, but this made his stomach turn. What kind of man abandons a woman in a blizzard? The kind who think a mail-order bride is just something he can throw away if she doesn't meet his expectations, Catherine said quietly. Apparently, my photograph made me look prettier than I actually am. Jake studied her face in the firelight. Even exhausted and scared, with her hair a mess and her dress ruined, Catherine Mills was a beautiful woman. But more than that, there was intelligence in her eyes and dignity in the way she held herself despite her circumstances. "James Thornton is a fool," Jake said simply. "Any man would be lucky to have you." Catherine looked up at him with surprise. In the warm light of the cabin, Jake could see the exact color of her eyes, a deep brown like rich coffee. There was something else there too, something that made him think there was more to her story than just being an abandoned bride. "You don't even know me," she said. "I know enough. I know you're brave enough to keep going when most people would have given up. I know you're polite enough to thank a stranger for helping you. And I know you deserve better than James Thornton." For the first time since she'd arrived, Catherine smiled. It transformed her whole face. "You're very kind, Mr. Hartwell, but I don't know what I'm going to do now. I spent almost all my money getting here, and there's no way to get back east until spring." "Then you'll stay here until spring," Jake said without thinking. When he saw her startled expression, he quickly added, "I mean, if you want to, the spare room is yours. You'll be perfectly safe." Outside, the wind continued to howl, and snow kept piling against the windows. But inside Jake's cabin, something had changed. For the first time in years, the place didn't feel empty. And for the first time since she'd left Boston, Catherine Mills felt like maybe, just maybe, she might have found exactly where she was supposed to be. She looked down at the crumpled letter in her lap, then carefully folded it and tucked it into her pocket. Some storms, she thought, might just blow you exactly where you need to go. The storm didn't let up for 2 more days. Catherine woke on her second morning at the Double H to find Jake already up, making breakfast and tending to his animals despite the howling wind outside. She watched him through the window as he fought his way to the barn, bent against the driving snow, and felt something warm spread through her chest. When was the last time a man had worked so hard just to keep her safe and comfortable? "You didn't have to get up so early," Jake said when he came back in, stomping snow off his boots. His cheeks were red from the cold, and ice crystals clung to his dark hair. "I couldn't sleep anyway," Catherine admitted. She'd spent most of the night staring at the ceiling, thinking about her situation. "Besides, I should help. You're already doing too much for a stranger." Jake paused and hanging up his coat. "You're not a stranger anymore, and you're my guest." Over breakfast, they talked more easily than Catherine had expected. Jake told her about his ranch, how he'd saved every penny for 5 years to buy the land, how he'd built the cabin with his own hands, how he dreamed of running the best cattle operation in the territory. "What about you?" Jake asked, refilling her coffee cup. "What was your life like back in Boston?" Catherine hesitated. She'd been dreading this question because it meant revealing things she wasn't sure she was ready to share. "I lived with my aunt after my parents died. I worked as a governess for wealthy families. That must have been hard work." "It was lonely work," Catherine said quietly. "Always caring for other people's children, never having a real home of my own. When I saw James's advertisement for a wife, I thought maybe I could finally have the family I'd always wanted." Jake reached across the small table and covered her hand with his. His palm was rough from ranch work, but his touch was gentle. "I'm sorry he hurt you." Catherine looked down at their joined hands. "The strange thing is, I'm not sure I am sorry anymore. Not completely." That afternoon, the wind died down enough for Jake to show Catherine around the cabin properly. It was bigger than it looked from outside, with 2 bedrooms, a main room with a kitchen area, and even a small room Jake used as an office for his ranch records. "You built all this yourself?" Catherine asked, running her hand along the smooth wood of a bookshelf. "Took me 3 summers, working when I wasn't tending cattle." Jake looked proud, but embarrassed. "I know it's not fancy like what you're used to." "It's beautiful," Catherine said, and she meant it. Every piece of furniture was crafted with care. Every corner showed attention to detail. "It feels like a real home." That evening, they sat by the fire after dinner. Jake was working on his account books, and Catherine was mending a tear in her dress with thread and needle she'd found in her trunk. The domestic quiet felt natural, comfortable in a way that surprised them both. "Jake," Catherine said suddenly, setting down her sewing, "I need to tell you something. I haven't been completely honest with you." Jake looked up from his numbers, and Catherine could see worry creep into his expression. "What do you mean?" Catherine got up and went to her trunk, returning with a small leather pouch and 2 letters. "I told you I spent almost all my money getting here. That wasn't exactly true." She opened the pouch, revealing a neat stack of bills. I saved every penny I earned for 6 years. I have enough money to get back east, to start over somewhere else if I wanted to. Jake stared at the money, then at her face. Why didn't you tell me? Because I was afraid you'd think I was taking advantage of your kindness. Catherine sat back down, twisting her hands nervously. And because I was afraid you'd tell me to leave. Catherine, Jake started, but she held up a hand. There's more. These letters came the day before I left Boston. She handed him the papers. They're from my sister Mary in Chicago. She owns a boarding house there, and she's been asking me to come help her run it. Good money, steady work, and I'd be with family. Jake read the letters slowly. When he looked up, his expression was unreadable. So you have choices. Real choices. You don't have to stay here at all. No, I don't have to stay here, Catherine agreed. But here's what I realized during this storm, sitting in your warm cabin, watching you risk your safety just to take care of your animals and make sure I had food and coffee. I don't want to leave. The words hung in the air between them. Jake set down the letters and leaned forward in his chair. What are you saying? I'm saying that maybe James Thornton did me the biggest favor of my life when he rejected me. Catherine's voice grew stronger. I'm saying that for the first time since I left Boston, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Jake stood up and moved to the window, looking out at the still falling snow. Catherine, you barely know me. You don't know what life is really like out here. The winters are hard. The work is endless. And there's no guarantee I'll make a success of this ranch. Do you want me to leave? She asked quietly. Jake turned around, and a look in his eyes made Catherine's heart skip. No, God help me, no. I've been alone on this ranch for 3 years, and I never realized how lonely I was until you walked through that door. Then why are you trying to talk me out of staying? Because you deserve better than a struggling cowboy who might lose everything in a bad year. Catherine stood up and walked over to him. What if I think a struggling cowboy who's kind and honest and works hard for his dreams is exactly what I deserve? They stood close enough that Catherine could see the gold flecks in Jake's brown eyes. The air between them felt charged, like the moment before lightning strikes. The storm's going to break soon, Jake said softly. When it does, you'll be able to leave if you want to. And what if I don't want to leave? Jake reached up and touched her face gently, his thumb brushing across her cheek. Then I'd like to see what happens next. Outside, the wind was finally starting to die down. Through the window, Catherine could see stars beginning to peek through the breaking clouds. The worst of the storm was over, but something new was just beginning. Jake, she whispered, I think I'd like to see what happens next too. The decision was made, though neither of them spoke it aloud. When morning came, Catherine Mills would have to choose her future. But tonight, for the first time in years, she knew exactly what her heart wanted. The morning sun broke through the clouds like a blessing, turning the snow-covered valley into a field of diamonds. Catherine stood at the window, watching Jake clear a path to the barn. The storm was finally over, and with it came the reality she'd been avoiding. She could leave now. The question was whether she would. Coffee's ready, Jake called from the kitchen. His voice was carefully neutral, but Catherine could hear the tension underneath. They both knew what this clear morning meant. They ate breakfast in comfortable quiet, but Catherine could feel the weight of unspoken words between them. Jake kept glancing at her like he was trying to memorize her face, and her heart ached at the thought of never seeing his gentle smile again. I should check the road conditions, Jake finally said, pushing back from the table. See how bad the drifts are. Before Catherine could answer, the sound of horses and voices carried across the snow. Jake frowned and moved to the window. Someone's coming. 2 riders. Catherine joined him at the window, and her stomach dropped like a stone. Even at a distance, she recognized the man in the lead. James Thornton sat tall in his saddle, his expensive coat pristine despite the harsh weather. The man beside him was older, wearing a sheriff's badge that caught the morning light. That's Tom Bradley, the county sheriff, Jake said grimly. What's Thornton want with him? Catherine's hands clenched into fists. Nothing good. The riders approached the cabin, and James dismounted with the easy confidence of a man who'd never doubted his welcome anywhere. Sheriff Bradley stayed in his saddle, looking uncomfortable. Jake opened the door before James could knock. "Thornton, Sheriff Bradley, what brings you out here after a storm like that?" "I've come for what's mine," James said, his cold blue eyes fixing on Catherine behind Jake's shoulder. "My bride seems to have gotten lost." "Your bride?" Jake's voice was dangerously quiet. "The woman you abandoned in a blizzard." James waved his hand dismissively. "A temporary misunderstanding. I had business to attend to, and I expected Catherine to wait like a proper woman should. Instead, she runs off and causes all this trouble." Catherine stepped forward, her chin raised. "I didn't run off, James. I nearly froze to death because you left me with nothing but a cruel note." "Now, Catherine, don't be dramatic." James's smile was patronizing. "I came back for you, didn't I? We have a wedding to plan." "We have nothing to plan," Catherine said firmly. "I wouldn't marry you if you were the last man in Montana territory." James's smile disappeared. "You don't have a choice. You came here as my mail-order bride, and that's exactly what you're going to be. Sheriff Bradley is here to make sure there's no trouble about it." Tom Bradley shifted uncomfortably in his saddle. "Now, Jim, I'm not here to force anybody into marriage. I just came along to make sure everyone stays civil." "There's nothing civil about abandoning a woman in a storm," Jake said, stepping slightly in front of Catherine. "And there's nothing legal about forcing someone into marriage against their will." James's face darkened. "This is none of your business, Hartwell. You're nothing but a dirt farmer playing at being a rancher. Catherine is a refined lady who needs a man who can provide for her properly." "Provide for her?" Jake's voice rose. "You left her to die." "I left her a perfectly good cabin with supplies," James snapped. "It's not my fault she was too foolish to stay put." "You left me with no food, no firewood, and no horse," Catherine said, her voice shaking with anger. "The cabin was freezing cold, and the roof was leaking. If Jake hadn't taken me in, I would have died." Sheriff Bradley looked increasingly troubled. "Jim, is that true? You left Miss Mills without proper supplies." "She had everything she needed," James lied smoothly. "Women always exaggerate these things." "I saw the cabin," Jake said. "Went by there yesterday morning when I was checking on neighbors. No one in a box, no food in the pantry, and water dripping through the roof. You left her there to suffer." "That's enough." James's composure finally cracked. "Catherine, get your things. You're coming with me right now." "I'm not going anywhere with you," Catherine said, surprised by the strength in her own voice. "I've made my choice." "Your choice?" James laughed harshly. "You think this broken-down cowboy is going to take care of you? He can barely keep his own ranch running. You'll be living in poverty within a year." Jake's hands clenched into fists, but Catherine spoke before he could respond. "I'd rather live in an honest man's cabin than a cruel man's mansion," she said. "Jake Hartwell is worth 10 of you, James Thornton." The words hung in the air like a challenge. James's face turned red with humiliation and anger. "Fine," he snarled. "Stay here and live like a savage. But don't come crying to me when winter sets in and your cowboy can't feed you." He turned to Sheriff Bradley. "You saw her, Tom. I offered to take her back, and she chose this fool instead. It's on her head now." Sheriff Bradley tipped his hat to Catherine. "Ma'am, it's clear to me that you're here of your own free will. And Jake Hartwell's a good man. I've known him for years." He looked at James with obvious distaste. "Jim, I think it's time we headed back." But James wasn't finished. He stepped closer to Jake, his voice low and threatening. "This isn't over, Hartwell. I don't like being made to look like a fool. You'd better watch yourself and your woman." "Is that a threat?" Jake asked quietly. "It's a promise," James replied. "Enjoy your little romance while it lasts. We'll see how long it takes before you get tired of an uppity Eastern woman who thinks she's too good for honest work." "That's enough." Jake stepped forward, and even though James was taller, something in Jake's posture made the other man take a step back. "Catherine is under my protection now. If you come near her again, we'll have a problem." James mounted his horse with sharp, angry movements. "You'll regret this, both of you. Mark my words." He wheeled his horse around and rode off, leaving Sheriff Bradley shaking his head. "Sorry about that, folks," Tom Bradley said. "I didn't know the whole story when Jim asked me to ride along. Jake, you're doing the right thing looking after Miss Mills. Jim Thornton's been trouble since the day he inherited that ranch." After the sheriff rode away, Jake and Catherine stood in the doorway, watching the riders disappear over the hill. The valley was quiet again, peaceful under its blanket of fresh snow. "Well," Catherine said finally, "I guess that settles it." Jake turned to look at her. "Are you sure? There's still time to change your mind." Thornton was right about one thing. Life out here isn't easy. Catherine reached for his hand, lacing their fingers together. "I told you yesterday, Jake Hartwell. I'm exactly where I want to be." Jake squeezed her hand, and when he smiled, Catherine felt like the sun had come out after the longest winter of her life. "Then I guess we'd better figure out how to make this work," he said. But as they watched James Thornton's figure disappear into the distance, neither of them could shake the feeling that his threat had been more than just angry words. Some storms, they both realized, leave more than just snow in their wake. 2 weeks after James's visit, Catherine had settled into a routine at the Double H that felt as natural as breathing. She woke before dawn to start coffee and breakfast, spending those quiet morning hours watching Jake tend to his cattle through the kitchen window. He moved with an easy confidence that made her heart skip, and she found herself looking forward to his return each morning. "You don't have to do all this," Jake said over breakfast, gesturing at the perfectly organized cabin and the hot meal waiting for him. "I managed fine before you came." "Maybe I like doing it," Catherine replied, refilling his coffee cup. "Besides, you're letting me stay in your spare room rent-free. The least I can do is earn my keep." The arrangement was practical and proper, but Catherine couldn't ignore the tension that crackled between them whenever Jake's hand brushed hers passing a plate, or when she caught him watching her with those warm brown eyes. Jake had insisted on giving her the larger bedroom while he took the small back room. "It's only temporary," he'd said, though neither of them talked about what would make it permanent. Catherine proved invaluable around the ranch. Her neat handwriting transformed Jake's messy account books into organized records, and she discovered a talent for stretching supplies and planning meals that saved money. When Jake's best work shirt tore on barbed wire, Catherine mended it so skillfully that it looked better than new. "Where did you learn to do that?" Jake asked, examining the perfect stitches. 6 years of mending other people's clothes teaches you a few things," Catherine said. "I may be from the city, but I know how to work." Their evenings fell into a comfortable pattern. Jake would read the livestock reports while Catherine worked on sewing or read one of his books. Sometimes they'd talk about their dreams. Jake's plans to expand a ranch, Catherine's idea of starting a small school for the local children. Other times they'd sit in companionable silence, both aware of the growing feelings neither was quite ready to voice. The first kiss happened on a Tuesday evening in March. Catherine was reaching for a book on the high shelf when Jake came up behind her to help. When she turned around, they were standing so close she could see the flecks of gold in his eyes. The book fell forgotten as Jake cupped her face in his hands and kissed her gently. "I'm sorry," he whispered against her lips. "I shouldn't have." "Don't apologize," Catherine said, her heart racing. "I've been hoping you would." But their growing happiness faced obstacles from the outside. James Thornton might have stayed away from the ranch, but his influence reached into town. Catherine noticed the stares when she accompanied Jake to the general store, heard the whispered conversations that stopped when she walked by. "People are talking," Mrs. Henderson from the Mercantile said pointedly during one visit. "An unmarried woman living with a bachelor. It's not proper. Catherine is a guest in my home," Jake replied firmly. "She's perfectly safe and respectable." But Catherine could see the doubt in some faces, the disapproval in others. James had been busy spreading his version of events, painting Catherine as a fickle woman who'd abandoned her betrothed for the first man who showed her attention. The pressure intensified when Reverend Mills visited the ranch unexpectedly. "I'm concerned about appearances," he told Jake while Catherine served coffee. "The community looks to its members to set a good example." "What exactly are you suggesting?" Jake asked, his voice careful. "Marriage or separation," the Reverend said bluntly. "There's no middle ground for a God-fearing community." After the Reverend left, Jake and Catherine sat on the porch in uncomfortable silence. The spring air was warm, but Catherine felt chilled. "Maybe he's right," she said finally. "Maybe I should write to my sister in Chicago. I don't want to damage her reputation." "My reputation?" Jake turned to face her. "Catherine, I don't care what people think, but I care what you think, what you want." "I want to stay," she said quietly, "but I don't want you to feel pressured into something you're not ready for." Jake took her hand. "What if I am ready? What if I've been ready since the moment you walked through my door?" Before Catherine could answer, a rider approached the house. Jake tensed as he recognized one of James's ranch hands. The man dismounted and handed Catherine an envelope. "Mr. Thornton asked me to deliver this." Inside was a single sheet of expensive paper with an urgent message in unfamiliar handwriting. "Catherine, your sister Mary is very ill. The boarding house is failing without help. Please come immediately. Travel money enclosed. Your loving sister." Catherine's hand shook as she read the letter twice. "It's from my sister in Chicago. She's sick and needs my help." Jake read over her shoulder, his expression growing troubled. "The timing seems convenient." "What do you mean? Right when we're getting pressure to marry or separate, suddenly your sister needs you desperately?" Jake shook his head. It could be coincidence, but Catherine looked at the letter again, doubt creeping into her mind. "You think James had something to do with this?" "I don't know, but I know he promised this wasn't over." That night, Catherine lay awake staring at the ceiling. Her sister's letter lay on the nightstand, a reminder that her old life was calling her back just when her new life was beginning to take shape. In the next room, she could hear Jake moving restlessly, probably wrestling with the same doubts and questions. Tomorrow would bring decisions that could change everything. But tonight, all Catherine could do was listen to her heart and hope it was leading her toward the right choice. Catherine spent the night reading her sister's letter over and over, searching for something that felt wrong. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but Mary could have asked someone else to write it. The urgent tone sounded desperate, but her sister had always been dramatic. By morning, Catherine's head ached from worry and lack of sleep. "I have to go," she told Jake over breakfast, though the words felt like swallowing glass. "Mary is my only family. If she's really sick—" Jake nodded, but she could see the pain in his eyes. "I understand. Family comes first." "I don't want to leave you," Catherine said, her voice breaking. "But what if she dies and I wasn't there to help? Then you'd never forgive yourself." Jake reached across the table and took her hands. "I'll drive you to town this morning. Help you arrange passage to Chicago." Catherine felt tears threatening. "What if I can't come back? What if the boarding house really is failing and Mary needs me to stay?" "Then I'll wait," Jake said simply. "However long it takes." They were loading Catherine's trunk into the wagon when hoofbeats thundered into the yard. James Thornton rode up fast, his face flushed with anger. "Going somewhere?" he called out, dismounting with sharp movements. "That's none of your business," Jake replied, stepping protectively in front of Catherine. James laughed harshly. "Oh, but it is my business. You see, I just had a very interesting conversation with the telegraph operator in town. Seems someone's been sending fake messages." Catherine's heart stopped. "What do you mean?" "I mean, there's no sick sister in Chicago begging for help," James snarled. "I had my man Tom wire the Chicago telegraph office. Your sister Mary is perfectly fine, and her boarding house is doing just fine too." The letter fell from Catherine's numb fingers. "But the handwriting, one of my ranch hands has very neat penmanship," James said smugly. "Amazing what men will do for extra pay." Jake's hands clenched into fists. "You lying piece of—" "The only liar here is your precious Catherine." James interrupted. Leading you on while planning to run back east the first chance she got. That's not true. Catherine found her voice. I was only going because I thought Mary needed me. Prove it, James sneered. Prove you weren't looking for an excuse to leave your cowboy behind. Jake stepped forward, his face dark with anger. You've gone too far, Thornton. Have I? Or have I just shown you what kind of woman you're wasting your time on? James's voice turned cruel. Face it, Hartwell. Eastern ladies like Catherine don't belong with dirt farmers like you. She was always going to leave. Stop it, Catherine said, her voice rising. Just stop it. But James wasn't finished. I'm taking her back where she belongs. One way or another. He grabbed Catherine's arm roughly, and that's when Jake exploded in emotion. His fist connected with James's jaw with a crack that echoed across the yard. James staggered backward, then came back swinging. The two men crashed to the ground, rolling and trading punches. James was bigger, but Jake was stronger from years of ranch work. Catherine screamed for them to stop as they fought in the dirt, but neither man was listening. James managed to grab a rock and swing it at Jake's head. Jake ducked, but the stone caught him on the shoulder, sending him sprawling. James raised the rock again, his face twisted with rage. Stop! Catherine threw herself between them. You'll kill him. Maybe that's the idea, James panted, but something in Catherine's expression made him hesitate. Look at yourself, Catherine said, her voice steady despite her fear. Look what you become. Is this the kind of man you want to be? For a moment, James wavered. Then his face hardened again. This is what he's made me become. Him and his interference. Jake struggled to his feet, blood running from a cut on his forehead. Catherine, get back. No, she said firmly. This ends now. She turned to James. You want to know why I won't marry you? This is why. Not because of Jake. Not because of money or status or anything else. Because you're cruel. Because you hurt people when you don't get your way. Catherine, James started. I'm not finished, she said, surprising herself with her strength. Jake has never laid a hand on me in anger. He's never threatened me or would try to force me into anything. He offered to drive me to town this morning, even though it was breaking his heart. That's the difference between a good man and a selfish one. James looked between Catherine and Jake, seeing something in their faces that made his shoulders slump in defeat. Fine, he said bitterly. Keep your cowboy, but don't come crying to me when this paradise turns into hell. He mounted his horse and rode away without looking back. Jake swayed on his feet, and Catherine rushed to support him. Are you all right? I'll live, he said, touching the cut on his head. But Catherine, about that letter. The letter was a lie, she said firmly. But my feelings aren't. Jake Hartwell, I love you. I want to stay here and build a life with you. Jake pulled her into his arms despite his injuries. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything in my life, Catherine said, then rose on her toes to kiss him. When they broke apart, Jake smiled through the blood and dirt on his face. Then maybe it's time I asked you properly. Catherine Mills, will you marry me? Yes, she whispered against his lips. Yes, yes, yes. In the distance, they could see James riding away, getting smaller and smaller until he disappeared completely. The threat that had hung over them was finally gone, and their future stretched out bright and promising as the Montana sky. Spring arrived early that year, bringing with it the most beautiful wedding the valley had ever seen. Catherine and Jake chose a spot by the creek where wildflowers carpeted the meadow in purple and yellow. The whole community turned out, even those who had whispered doubts about their arrangement. Seeing Catherine in her mother's white dress, radiant with happiness, and Jake in his best suit, proud and gentle, no one could doubt that this was a love match made in heaven. Reverend Mills performed the ceremony with obvious pleasure, having seen how the couple's love had transformed both their lives. When Jake slipped his grandmother's simple gold band onto Catherine's finger, there wasn't a dry eye among the witnesses. You may kiss your bride, the Reverend announced, and Jake's kiss was so tender and full of promise that several women in the crowd sighed with romantic satisfaction. Tom Bradley, who had become a friend after witnessing James's true character, clapped Jake on the back. "About time you made an honest woman of her, Jake. Though I reckon she was always honest." It was the rest of us who had doubts. The wedding feast was held in Jake's barn, which Catherine had decorated with wildflowers and white ribbons. The whole community had contributed food, and the fiddle music and dancing lasted until well past midnight. As Catherine danced with her new husband under the stars, she thought about how different this celebration was from the cold, formal wedding she would have had with James Thornton. "Happy?" Jake asked, spinning her around as the music swirled. "Happier than I ever dreamed possible," Catherine replied, and meant every word. Their wedding night was spent in the cabin Jake had built with his own hands, but which now truly felt like home. Catherine had moved her belongings into the main bedroom, and Jake had surprised her by adding a window seat where she could sit and read in the morning light. "I love you, Mrs. Hartwell," Jake whispered in the darkness. "I love you too," Catherine replied, marveling at how natural her new name sounded. The first year of marriage brought challenges that tested their commitment. A harsh winter killed nearly half their cattle, and money became tight. But Catherine's careful management of their finances and Jake's unwavering determination saw them through. She took in sewing work from neighboring women, and Jake hired himself out to other ranches when needed. Together, they slowly rebuilt their herd. Catherine also began teaching the local children in their cabin during the winter months when farm work was light. Word spread quickly about the educated Eastern lady who could help children with reading and arithmetic, and soon parents from miles around were bringing their youngsters for lessons. "You're making a real difference," Jake told her one evening, watching her grade papers by lamplight. "These kids never had a chance at real learning before." "Every child deserves the chance to better themselves," Catherine replied, "just like we all deserve the chance to find where we truly belong." By their second spring, the Double H Ranch was thriving again. Jake's careful breeding program had produced strong, healthy calves, and Catherine's vegetable garden provided fresh food and extra income from sales in town. They had become respected members of the community, with Jake serving as a mediator in local disputes and Catherine organizing the church ladies' auxiliary. It was during their second summer that Catherine discovered she was expecting their first child. She told Jake the news as they sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. "A baby?" Jake's face lit up like Christmas morning. "Are you happy?" Catherine asked, suddenly nervous. Jake pulled her into his arms and spun her around carefully. "Happy doesn't begin to cover it. I'm going to be a father, and you're going to be a mother, and our child is going to be the luckiest kid in Montana territory." Their son was born the following spring, a healthy boy with Jake's dark hair and Catherine's brown eyes. They named him David, and he became the light of their lives. Catherine marveled at how naturally Jake took to fatherhood, often finding him in the nursery at night, just watching their son sleep. 2 years later came their daughter Sarah, followed by another son, Michael. The little cabin Jake had built for a bachelor became a bustling family home filled with laughter and love. As the years passed, the Double H Ranch grew into one of the most successful operations in the territory. Jake's reputation for fair dealing and quality livestock spread throughout Montana, while Catherine's school had become an established institution. She had also started helping other mail-order brides who found themselves in difficult situations, offering them shelter and guidance. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Jake and Catherine stood on their porch watching their children play in the yard. The cabin had been expanded twice, and Jake was already planning another addition for their growing family. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if James hadn't abandoned you that night?" Jake asked, his arm around Catherine's waist. Catherine smiled, one hand resting on her gently rounded belly where their 4th child was growing. "Not for a single moment. Everything that happened brought me exactly where I needed to be." In her apron pocket, she still carried that crumpled abandonment letter from James Thornton, not as a reminder of pain, but as proof that sometimes the greatest storms in life blow you straight into the arms of your destiny. She had heard through Tom Bradley that James had finally married a wealthy widow from Denver, but it was a cold, business arrangement that everyone knew would bring neither of them happiness. As Catherine watched Jake lift their youngest son onto his shoulders while their daughter chased butterflies in the wildflower meadow, she touched her growing belly and smiled. She had found her home, her love, and her purpose. The desperate woman who had collapsed in the snow that terrible night was gone forever, replaced by Mrs. Catherine Hartwell, rancher's wife, mother, teacher, and the happiest woman in all of Montana Territory. The sun set behind the mountains in a blaze of gold and pink, painting their little valley in the warm colors of contentment. Jake pulled Catherine closer as their children's laughter filled the evening air, and she knew with absolute certainty that every step of her journey, even the painful ones, had led her to this perfect moment. Sometimes, Catherine thought, as Jake kissed her temple gently, the best love stories begin with someone else's rejection. James Thornton's cruelty had become Jake Hartwell's and her own greatest blessing.